I'm Taylor Williams, and I'm here today with Dr. Ken Peterson. Ken is my former voice teacher from college, taught me for a few years here, a few years there, but mostly from 2010 through 2014, where he taught at Dixie State College, then University, as it turned into a university while we were there.
Yep.
And in the process of that, he taught me most of what I know about voice. And if he couldn't teach it to me, then he led me to the books that were able to teach it to me. Especially that Sounds of Singing by Burton Coffin. Probably the biggest one that I still use. I actually have a Kindle version.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I have it on my iPad. So I know you've never been the biggest, like, let's have electronic devices kind of person.
That's not necessarily the case.
Has that changed? Has that gotten easier for you or better?
I do both still.
Yeah.
I mean, when you want access to libraries of information, a searchable database, you have to be digital.
Yeah.
So I use both.
Well, tell us about your experience in voice training.
My academic resume, the degrees, I have a Bachelor of Music in Voice Performance from Utah State University, a Master of Music in Voice Performance from Illinois State University, and a Doctor of Arts in Voice Performance and Pedagogy from the University of Northern Colorado. But my vocal training, voice lessons started when I was 12. And I imagine they started much like anyone else's, nothing particularly special, although I want to say at the outset that all of my voice teachers were very kind to me and very encouraging, without exception. I was very fortunate to have such kind people to work with me.
Was that in Wyoming?
Mm-hmm. And now on the other side of that, and I want to preface that because I love all the teachers that I've had, that they treated me so kindly. In truth, of all of those teachers, and I was counting them, could be a dozen teachers that I've had over my career, there were only two of them that knew how to help me in terms of vocal technique. Although one, ironically, I went the furthest backward as a singer, but in terms of vocal repertoire, I made the greatest leap. I started when I was 12. This dear woman who was teaching at the high school took me under her wing and taught me some Schubert and some other things.
And Do you remember any of like your first songs that you sang back then?
Schubert's Ständchen was the very first, I think, German piece she taught me.
From Schwannegesang.
Which, was still one of my favorite Schubert pieces.
It's a gorgeous piece, absolutely.
And then I began studying with my aunt in northern Wyoming, where I lived, who treated me as her own child and was very encouraging and found opportunities for me to perform and introduced me to some musical theater repertoire. Maria from West Side Story at the tender age of 16.
Did you get to the B flat in that one at 16?
I don't even remember. No, I don't know. I may have. I may have been accessing the B flat at 16.
When you taught me that song, you wouldn't let me not do the B flat, which I'm thinking holds about 8 measures long.
It might even be a B natural. I don't know.
Maria.
So anyway, I studied with my aunt for a couple of years and did a lot of singing in the community and in the high schools and on the radio, and a lot of singing in church, a lot of good sacred literature. Then I went to my first collegiate experience was at Casper Community College. And I had a couple of different options. I had a scholarship to BYU, but I saw Casper College came through my high school on a tour, and the students were having so much fun. I was part of their ensembles. I couldn't help but want to be a part of that. And I was still playing trombone then, and just got excited about the jazz idiom. So they offered me a scholarship to sing and play my trombone. So I got to play in their jazz ensembles, which was exhilarating. So much fun for me.
I don't think I ever knew that you played trombone.
First year.
Good for you.
Yeah, I had I started improvisation any earlier, I may have been hooked and been in the gutter by now. I don't know. But Casper was a marvelous experience for me. You know, you up your game to the collegiate level. But we had so much fun. And the faculty there, again, were very invested in the students. Dr. Pat Patton, he was at the beginning of his career. Not much older than myself then. I didn't even think of it that way.
We don't often do that when we're in college, no.
But he really worked. He realized, well, I don't know how to put this. He was very much invested in my success and took very good care of me. In fact, a couple of years ago, he was the clinician at the ACDA convention in Salt Lake.
Explain what the ACDA is.
American Choral Directors Association, Utah chapter. And so he was the clinician working with the choirs on the U of U campus. So I made a trip up there. I hadn't been to one before because I'm too busy working, but
of course,
I went up to watch him work, and I had not seen him since 1980. So over 30 years. So I approached him and I said, Dr. Patton. He says, yes, my name is Ken Peterson. I don't know if you remember me. He threw his hands out, Ken Peterson. Anyway,
good.
That was a lot of fun. So we reminisced and got caught up. And anyway, it's the exemplary of the relationships you form in any career, but in my case, singing and the theater, lifelong friends.
Lifelong, absolutely.
Anyway, one of the things that he taught me, which I imagine we'll talk about, that when I was to sing, I was to open my mouth so wide that my jaw would unhinge. At that joint right there, you'd feel the indentation. And that's opening in the extreme. I now realize it can lead to TMJ syndrome, number one.
Wait, what's TMJ?
Temporomandibular joint disorder.
Those are some words.
That's what they call it. That's what they call them.
Disorder.
That's what they call a TMJ. You can overextend any joint, and that is to the extreme, and to do that routinely. And of course, the other problem was it prevented me from ever really accessing the higher registers that very high tenors need to access. And being a natural-born high tenor and being in my teens, I could get away with singing like that.
Because
opening and pushing, because my voice was high and very high and still in its youthful prime.
Not as easy to be damaged when you're younger, or
I guess so.
Like that.
And then eventually it would shift as I went up toward the B and the C. But even then I could have been singing a lot easier than I was, I should say. But a wonderful experience. And the real golden egg from that experience in Casper was that he had connections to Central City Opera, who were putting out feelers for tenors to sing in their chorus, an opera chorus, a professional, paid opera chorus at the age of 18. So I auditioned and was accepted and got to spend the summer of 1981 singing in the mountains of Colorado and rubbing shoulders with professional opera singers and doing that all day long. It was a dream come true for me.
That sounds like a lot of fun, too.
And back then, now Central City itself is a gambling town. Oh. The opera is very big there, but it has found this new source of revenue and wealth from the gambling, and so it's very different. When I was there in 1981, the primary economic driver for the town was the opera company. And the properties that were owned. And right next to this old 1800 opera house was the Teller House, this hotel, which now has casinos and stuff in it. And I remember like 5 or 6 stories, and they were all practice rooms. So all day long with the windows open, you'd hear these incredible voices.
All just coming from one building.
Echoing up and down the streets of this mountain town. It was wonderful. We did Madame Butterfly. So I was in the chorus. and we did the Ballad of Baby Doe that I fell in love with.
Yeah, I've heard a few of those ones while I was at the college.
A marvelous soprano, great production. And I got to have lunch with Charles Strauss, composer of Annie. He was workshopping The Emperor and the Nightingale that summer, and I think I was in that. But that really gave me a huge leap forward advantage in having a perspective of what being a professional singer was and what a professional singer sounds like and what the expectations are and how they work. To see that up close and personal was really extraordinary. So after Casper, I served a mission in Japan, came back and went to what was then Rick's College, BYU, Idaho. There again, had a very positive experience. I mean, I got back from my mission on Saturday and was sitting in class on Monday.
It's a very quick transition.
It was crazy, and it was a lot of fun. In many of these smaller institutions, the choral director also taught voice. And most choral directors, if they're being honest, will tell you that they haven't had a lot of vocal pedagogy coursework.
Well, there's definitely a distinction with how to teach the voices in a choir from how to teach the voices individually. Yeah. I mean, I've seen personally where you are able to branch both of those together and be able to use a lot of the same techniques, but I also noticed in taking private voice from you versus taking choir from you that it was almost like a complete subject in the private and then a partial subject in the choir.
Yeah.
So do you find that that's the same with a lot of other choir teachers, or do you think they just don't know how to transition one to the other?
I'm one of the few choral directors whose pedagogical background has been that of a soloist. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, maybe one or two others who have done that. And when I came to Dixie State, which when I was hired was looking for someone to do everything, vocal, the choirs, the lessons, and the musicals, vocal direct the musicals, which was perfect for me because of my eclectic background. And so I found myself in charge of all these choirs, and I knew I had recently become acquainted with the works of Bert Coffin and the Chromatic Vowel chart, which we'll discuss. And the Chromatic Vowel chart was designed to be used specifically for individual voices. It's tailored to individual voices.
Right, you literally moved the chart based off of the voice.
Correct.
Type.
But even so, I began to see general trends that could be applied carte blanche to an ensemble setting. And I began to experiment with that. And to my knowledge, I'm the only one who's ever done that. Applied the work of Bert Coffin and resonance tuning according to his methodology and according to his science, applying that to a choral setting. And it was astonishing for me. I'll tell you experience, but if you can, and you've heard the difference that it can make with one voice,
right.
Multiply that times 70.
And that's your choir.
Or the Heritage Choir, multiply that times 200.
Right. The large choir that you direct here in St. George. Yes.
Right. And so it was really an experiment on my part, applying Bert Coffin to a choral setting. And this was in 2004, and they'd just finished the Eccles building. And they were going to have this inaugural concert, as part of which they were going to have me sing. And I had invited my brother, Kurt, who at one time was a renowned tenor.
That was my first year there. I wonder if I was at that. It was quite a long time ago.
So he and I did a concert together, the three tenors. I don't think it was that year. It was probably later in the Cox, and it was televised. But he and I sang duets and solos as part of the inauguration of the Eccles building. And he came to our inaugural choral concert there. And at the time, he was a faculty member at the University of Colorado in Boulder, one of the more renowned schools of music in the West. And that's where Bert Coffin actually worked and did his work. So my brother Kurt had kind of inherited the mantle of Bert Coffin, and I was exposed to Bert Coffin through my brother. In any case, so he was there at the choral concert. And afterward, and the concert was fantastic. And afterward, he approached me and he says, "Ken, what are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Your choirs sound amazing." He said, "I wish the choirs at CU sounded like that." And I said, "I'm applying the Chromatic Vowel chart." to my choir. And he's like, whoa, hadn't considered it. And I did it of necessity, and I do it to this very day. It's quite amazing.